From this video we will learn when reptilians came to Earth, and what is their strategy for conquering a planet or civilization. What is the role of reptilians in God's creation? We will learn about the war from 100,000 years ago, that took place between various extraterrestrial civilizations. This war that took place near and in the atmosphere of our planet and what happened within the Galactic Alliance at that time. We will also find out why aliens decided to build pyramids in many locations on Earth, as well as other interesting things. The fragments I will read are from the book The Forgotten Genesis written by Radha Chinnamar. Let's get started. The period about 100,000 years ago was very dark for mankind, as it involved a devastating conflict between many of the alien civilizations then existing on Earth. I would even go so far as to say that was the most terrible confrontation I have ever seen, in relation to Earth, but it was entirely alien in origin. All of the warring parties were extraterrestrial and were disputing territory or power of influence. It was a very difficult time, a breakup period, because many civilizations broke away from the Galactic Alliance they had joined. Due to the highly advanced technologies and the nature of the weaponry used, life on the planet's surface has suffered greatly, and in some areas, which are now underwater, has been completely eradicated. I have seen terrible images of this conflict, which took place both in the Earth's atmosphere and outside it, in outer space. I was struck at the time by the fact that the intensity of the fighting was so great, that a significant part of the planet's sky as seen from the ground was almost red. The clashes were of an unprecedented severity. Huge explosions left enormous debris on the Earth's surface. I also saw how they later extracted that debris, by sort of crumbling it and then absorbing it into giant ships, like containers. In my mind, at the time I called them garbage ships, but they were probably huge ships for transport. Strangely, that terrible conflict was not atomic. I saw only a few detonations reminiscent of nuclear explosions, but they were of lesser intensity than other deflagrations that occurred at the same time. The main source of disagreement was complex in nature. It involved a race of evil beings from our galaxy with reptilian traits. In the economy of the universe, reptilians seem to have a special destiny, for they appear at key points in the evolution of races or civilizations, even if their actions are not conscious of this, but directed only towards a selfish goal of control and oppression. From the presentation I have seen, reptilian beings live long lives and in order to thrive they seek to find a suitable ground from which to feed, so reptilians seek to conquer planets and civilizations to exploit and use to accomplish their goals, but in such a way that they don't have to worry too much about them. Being quite technologically advanced, they aim to infiltrate those regions and star systems of the galaxy where advanced civilizations already exist, but not as much as their own. They are not interested in primitive civilizations or civilizations that have just reached the dawn of technological progress, as they aim for those that already have some potential, in order to conquer them relatively easily, but still have something to use from them afterwards, according to their level of development. From this point of view, reptilians can be said to be pragmatic. If the civilization in question were primitive or at too low a level of development, this would imply a consistent effort on their part to shepherd it, where they do not want to work too hard. On the other hand, if they conquered too much too fast, it would exceed their possibilities of covering and control. This is why the evil reptilians show amazing patience, specializing in subversive infiltration actions. They corrupt and conquer an advanced civilization not necessarily by destroying, pillaging and then leaving the planet, but mostly by undermining it, by intrigue and corruption. In other words, in most cases they are not brutal predators, but work at more refined levels, through hybridization and the introduction of low vibrational frequency genes. They know that if they get to corrupt enough of a race's DNA, it will eventually retain their specific imprint and then they will always have a foothold and action in that civilization. The bigger this specific trace imprinted in a race's DNA, the better for the reptilians, because then they will be able to influence it more easily in decisions and actions. Therefore, their plans are less violent, immediate or with large-scale cosmic battles, and more long-term, infiltrating the DNA of some races with their own DNA. In time, they know that this action will corrupt that race, at least to some extent, and that weakness they can then use for their own benefit. In this way, evil reptilians end up corrupting even advanced civilizations in an indirect way. As I said, they always aim to orient themselves towards those civilizations that are not very developed, but which are nevertheless part of cosmic alliances or have entrances to some developed civilizations. By applying the hybridization modality, they simply infiltrate the germs of evil into that civilization or alliance of developed civilizations, placing their hybrids in important positions and thus creating breaches in the security and good understanding in that alliance. It's a very subversive, but effective way of spreading their evil influence throughout the galaxy. This was also the way they acted in the case of Earth. Using infiltration through some of the Galactic Alliance member civilizations, and even a civilization that was descended from the original Sirians, but had settled in a star system other than Sirius A, they transmitted elements of their own DNA into the human population. What surprised me somewhat was that the infiltration was not a mass infiltration, but rather followed a subtle path. I have seen that, through certain hybridization actions, their genes corrupted the DNA of a small number of human beings at first, but that corruption later spread to a large number of beings, taking the form of negative ways of thinking and acting. They manifested themselves mostly through misguided beliefs, which through repetition from generation to generation came to create perverted gaps and connections within human DNA. This subtle way of perversion was later used by humans to achieve onerous goals. So, in ancient times reptilians initially planted a few bad seeds, which then proliferated and developed over time to the point where their influence in human DNA could no longer be denied or annihilated. It is true, however, that this corruption does not occupy a large percentage of the DNA macromolecule, but as far as we have seen it only represents about 2 to 3% or even less, but even so some tendencies, habits and actions, especially in contemporary society, show us what negative effects can occur as a result of the resonances induced by this very dangerous civilization. The corruption and infiltration of reptilians even among relatively advanced Alliance civilizations led quite quickly to claims on certain territories both on Earth and in our solar system that they wanted to control. I have seen and understood, in a clever combination of images, that some of the higher beings of those civilizations have begun to manifest certain intentions and tendencies, other than those respecting universal harmony, in moving toward objectives and goals with individual and power-oriented goals. In other words, they began to decline spiritually, because the path of temptation is very winding and treacherous, and the evil reptilians know very well the tricks by which to influence beings and even entire civilizations in this direction. The problem was that those alien beings, representing some Alliance civilizations, began to forcibly demarcate some territories of influence, which they took under occupation. Following the outbreak of conflict, the Alliance broke up for a time and split into several smaller alliances according to affinities and interests. That was a very turbulent and challenging time for mankind. As far as I have seen, it took over 20,000 years for things to get back to normal and to restore some balance, both in the planet's ecosystem and in the existence of humanity since then. At the same time, the original alliance was rebuilt to some extent. Images showed me condensations of fleets or various snapshots of diplomatic meetings between representatives of civilizations, which varied in number of members. It was the only way I could figure out what actually happened immediately after the conflict. Then, about 70,000 years ago, the Sirians of the Sirius A system decided to strengthen that alliance, of which they were also a part. They did not intervene armed in the great conflict in the alliance, although practically speaking they were the patrons. The Sirians then only played the role of mediators. Being somewhat puzzled by this, I asked why they did not intervene in that conflict, to end it or at least to mitigate it. The man from Apellos explained to me that, on the scale it was, that war between alien civilizations involved not only Earth, but also had as an element of dispute a demarcation of areas of interest in the galaxy, for different forces and groups within it. The situation was tense on several planets, and that's why the Sirians sought to protect as much as possible the galactic sector we were part of. Perhaps if they had actually intervened in the conflict, it would have escalated hostilities and at some point the situation could have become uncontrollable. On the other hand, they wished to leave the course of events and individual choices free, in accordance with cosmic laws and principles, intervening only where the recklessness of some civilizations could bring great destruction or irreparable disruption to the natural course of things and the divinely integrated plans. The Sirians have never wanted to escalate conflicts, even though they could have won them quite easily, thanks to their extraordinary technological advance. They prefer the alternative of peace and evolution, which is in accordance with the laws of universal harmony, and seek to respect as much as possible the free will of the civilizations they come into contact with. Only when they are attacked and have to defend themselves, as I have seen in the great confrontations with the reptilians, do they use their highly advanced combat capabilities.